Stop recording button. Unchecked checkbox. New text document. 5. Note. Hansel and Gretel, hard by a great forest, dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once when great dearth fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children, when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman, "early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each of them 1 more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces. Selected. Tooltip, Task Manager. Tears, and said to Hansel, "Now all is of them 1 more piece of bread. Children alone in the forest, the wild animals, of them 1 more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." Narrator settings window. Press any key on the keyboard. Narrator settings window. Checked enable the shortcut to launch narrator. Windows key and enter, or Windows button and volume up on touch devices. Checkbox, Alt+K. 30 seconds, 4 of 7. Retain notifications to be read for 30 seconds. Editable combo box, Alt+N. Exiting narrator. Narrator settings window. Press any key on the keyboard to hear the name. Narrator settings window. Unchecked read, and interact with the screen using the mouse checkbox, Alt+R. Press any key on the narrator settings window. Voice speed, 50 75.
Select 50. Selected.
Microsoft David. Microsoft Mark Mobile.
Select a different voice for narrator. Find other voices. Untitled. Desktop. Tooltip. Desktop. Assistive technology products for Windows. Tooltip. Assistive technology products for Windows. Ease of access center window. Start narrator button. Alt+N. Window. Narrator settings window. Find other voices that work with narrator. Narrator settings window. Press command. Narrator settings window. Commands. Stop reading selected. Selection contains over 100 items. 20% vertically scrolled. Columns command shortcut. Contains 83 rows. Table command. Show commands for current item. Increase verbosity mode. Start reading. Tooltip. Start narrator. Tooltip. Read all items in containing area. Exiting narrator. Narrator settings window. Press Enter. New text document. 5. Hansel and Gretel. Command unavailable in normal mode. Command unavailable in normal mode. Narrator settings window. Voice. Narrator settings window. Voice speed, 50. Press any key on the keyboard to hear the narrator settings window. Commands. Stop reading selected. Selection contains over 100 items. New text. Command unavailable in normal mode. Narrator settings window. Commands. New assistive technology. New tab. C M L L N O. Enter. Desktop. Google. Desktop. Command unavailable in normal mode. Google. Command unavailable in normal mode. Space. Space. Narrator commands Windows. F A N. Find. Editing text. Advanced. New text. Verbose level 2. Command unavailable in normal mode. Verbose level 3. Verbose level 4. Verbose level 5. Verbose level 0. Verbose level 1. Caps lock. Verbose level 2. Verbose level 3. Verbose level 5. Verbose level 0. Verbose level 5. Command unavailable in verbose level 1. Narrator commands Windows 8.pdf window. Address N R T U V O. Desktop. Google. Desktop. HTTP. Desktop. Microsoft support. Chapter 6. Customizing narrator in Windows 10. Windows Help. Chapter 6. Enter. Narrator settings window. Commands. Narrator settings window. Unchecked read. And normal. Select the narrator cursor. Desktop. New text document. Cap. 1 items in current containing area. Cancel. Cap. 1 items in current containing area. Narrator settings window. Narrator settings window. Narrator settings window. Commands. Stop reading selected. Selection contains over 100 items. New. A. Cancel and cap. 1 items in current containing area. Vertical. Scroll bar at 100%. Cap. 1 items in current containing area. Tab. Table commands. Read all items in containing area column head. New text document. Caps lock. New text document. 5. Notepad window. Cancel. New text document. Tab. New text document. Table commands. Read all items in containing area column header command. New text document. Hansel and Gretel, hard by a great forest, dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once when great dearth fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children, when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman, "early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each of desktop, at *rhyme 63. 0% vertically scrolled. A. Caps lock. Hansel and Gretel, hard by a great forest, dwelt a new text document. 5. Notepad window. Cap. Hansel and Gretel, hard by a great forest, dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once when great dearth fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children, when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman, "early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each of them 1 more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," said she, "then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the planks for our coffins," and she left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children, all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears, and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel, "do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us. And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and stuffed the little pocket of his coat with as many as he could get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace, God will not forsake us," and he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came. OBS 17.0.2, Windows, Profile, Untitled, 8, 69, 65. New text document, 5, Notepad window, H. Replay, new text, has risen, and then, cap, Hansel and Gretel hard by a great forest dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He cap, whole night and all the next day too from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always came deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, they must die of hunger and weariness. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when its song was over, it spread its wings and flew away before them, and they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it alighted, and when they approached the little house they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window, it will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above, and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leant against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the parlor, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw, who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who liked the taste of the roof, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head, and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in, and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand, and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch, who lay in wait for children, and had only built the little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked and ate it, and that was a feast day with her. Witches have red eyes, and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like the beasts, and are aware when human beings draw near. When Hansel and Gretel came into her neighborhood, she laughed with malice, and said mockingly, "I have them, they shall not escape me again." Early in the morning before the children were awake, she was already up, and when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty, with their plump and rosy cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty mouthful." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and locked him in behind a grated door. Scream as he might, it would not help him. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for your brother, he is in the stable outside, and is to be made fat." When he is fat, I will eat him. Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain, for she was forced to do what the wicked witch commanded. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable, and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may feel if you will soon be fat." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience and would not wait any longer. "Now, then, Gretel," she cried to the girl, "stir yourself, and bring some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean, tomorrow I will kill him, and cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow down her cheeks. "Dear God, do help us," she cried. "If the wild beasts in the forest had but devoured us, we should at any rate have died together." "Just keep your noise to yourself," said the old woman, "it won't help you at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water, and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven, and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated, so that we can put the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her, too. But Gretel saw what she had in mind, and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough, just look, I can get in myself," and she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it, and shut the iron door, and fastened the bolt. Oh! Then she began to howl quite horribly, but Gretel ran away and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel, however, ran like lightning to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang like a bird from its cage when the door is opened. How they did rejoice and embrace each other, and dance about and kiss each other. And as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could be got in, and Gretel said, "I, too, will take something home with me," and filled her pinafore full. "But now we must be off," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great stretch of water. "We cannot cross," said Hansel, "I see no foot plank, and no bridge." "And there is also no ferry," answered Gretel, "but a white duck is swimming there, if I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, little duck, dost thou see, Hansel and Gretel are waiting for thee? There's never a plank, or bridge in sight, take us across on thy back so white." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back, and told his sister to sit by him. "No," replied Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck, she shall take us across, one after the other." The good little duck did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw from afar their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the parlour, and threw themselves round their father's neck. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse, whosoever catches it, may make himself a big fur cap out of it. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once upon a time, OBS 17.0.2, Windows, Profile, Untitled, Scenes, Untitled window, Stop recording button.